Welcome to the January 12th, 2017 meeting in the Murfreesboro City Council. Our prayer and pledge will be by Miss Madeline Scales-Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. May we go to the Lord in prayer. May we bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, you're awesome. You're God all by yourself, and we acknowledge that, Lord, and we thank you for that. We thank you again for the things we just so often take for granted day by day. Even this very moment that we're in here, Lord, is a gift from you. We don't deserve it, Lord, but just your grace and your mercy is the reason why we're here, and we acknowledge and thank you for that. We thank you for the things that we just take for granted, like food, shelter, even friendships, Lord. Lord, we come to you at this time as humble as we know how, just thanking you that you are allowing us to live in a city where it's peace compared to a lot of places in the United States, Lord, and we thank you for that. We thank the police officers and the firefighters for their protection. We pray for the sick and shut in, Lord. We pray for the disabled, the veterans, and Lord, we pray a special prayer for our students, Lord, in our school system. Lord, as we prepare to carry on the business of the city, we ask for your grace and your mercy and allow us to do things and say things that are pleasing in your sight, Lord. And Lord, we pray for the bereaved all over the world, Lord. This is our prayer that we ask in your darling Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't have any ceremonial items tonight, but we do have a birthday tonight. So if it's a council member and it's your birthday, would you raise your hand? So happy birthday, Kurt.
Speech.
How's that cookie, Kurt? Or those chips? You sure you don't want to say something? All right, you have the consent agenda in front of you. Kurt's going to make the motion for this.
If he's not too old.
Any items that you want to remove from the consent agenda?
Move for approval.
Second. Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Scales-Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. You have the minutes of the December 1st, 2016 regular meeting.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Scales-Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Second readings. We'll consider for passage on second and final reading ordinance 16068, granting a franchise to Atmos Energy Corporation of Texas and Virginia Corporation for the distribution of natural gas and for the installation of maintenance of mains, pipes, pipelines, distribution lines, and other equipment necessary or incidental to distribution of said gas across, along, and under the highway, streets, avenues, roads, alleys, lanes, and other public grounds of the city of Murfreesboro, Rutherford County, Tennessee, in order to furnish gas service within the city to its inhabitants.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Ms. Scales-Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We now move into new business. Pursuant to Resolution 16R PH 61, adopted by the City Council on November 17, 2016, will conduct a public hearing to consider 1, the adoption of plan of services for an annexation of 36.9 acres, and 2, zoning of approximately 36.9 acres along Asbury Road and Asbury Lane, which have been proposed to be annexed to the City of Murfreesboro, Tennessee as Planned Residential Development, PRD District. Anthony King, Descenda Malone, Levi Grantham, and Land Management Group applicants 2016-518, 2016-455. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the December 26, 2016 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Mayor and council members. Our first public hearing this evening is for you to consider the annexation and the adoption of plan of services for an annexation petition we received for property located along both Asbury Lane and Asbury Road. This property is shaded in purple on the map that's on the screen and before you on your monitors. The property itself is approximately 36.9 acres, and that number does include right-of-way of Asbury Lane and of Asbury Road, and that's the right-of-way that is contiguous with the frontage of the property. The property owners have submitted a petition asking the city for annexation, so the only properties being considered for annexation are those for which we received a petition for annexation. And that petition was made by the King family and the Grantham family, who own the property now. The land management group does have a contract to purchase the property, but because they do not own it, they cannot make a petition for annexation. The zoning change request, which will be discussed in the future, that application was made by the land management group. We've provided to you a plan of services that outlines the services that the city can provide and a scheduled time frame for when we can provide them. The city can provide services to this property, and that's identified in the plan of services. The property is contiguous with city limits, and it's also within the urban growth boundary. The Planning Commission considered this item in November, at an evening in November, and at the public hearing they did recommend unanimously that the annexation be approved. Mr. Matt Taylor is representing the applicant, and he's here this evening if you have anything regarding the annexation. You should take two motions regarding the annexation. One would be first on the plan of services, and then after that would be on the actual annexation of the property. After you just make your decision regarding the annexation, I'll come back to the lectern and present to you the zoning change request. So this public hearing, which you're about to hold, is to consider the annexation only, and then we will have a separate public hearing to consider the zoning change request. Do you have any questions for me before conducting your public hearing regarding the annexation?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Okay, we'll need to conduct a public hearing on the plan of services and the annexation of approximately 36.9 acres located along Asbury Road and Asbury Lane. This is for the plan of services and for the annexation, not the zoning. Our public hearing rules, if you'll come to the podium, if you'll state your name and also state your address, if you'll keep all questions to the city council. If you're representing a group, you have 5 minutes. If you're representing yourself, it's 3 minutes. And we'll answer all questions at the end of the public hearing with staff. So anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium.
My name is Audra Hayes, and I live at 4340 Horde Road, and we are very close in this area. And I have come tonight to ask that you be reasonable and responsible in your decisions and concerning the annexation and this whole Kensington project. We would ask that it not be approved for the safety of my family and all the families that are around and my neighbors. In the council's own words, the roads in that area receive an F-. They do not meet the needs of the present residents at this time. And the council itself has acknowledged the disastrous traffic reports, and they've also acknowledged in their own words that there is no plan in place to correct the existing traffic issues. So we are already in this area looking at a projected 600 people added daily to this already unsafe traffic situation just from Pearly Brook. So, and I have to ask, I mean, how many more people are we going to put in danger just for the revenue from this project? Could this project not be delayed until the traffic issues are resolved? Could that not be taken care of first? So tonight, you're not just voting on the revenue for City of Murfreesboro. You're voting for people's lives. So when you vote, you need to consider and realize that you're going to shoulder responsibilities for the injuries and the deaths that are going to occur from an irresponsible vote. So once again, we ask that you vote no at this time. We're not against houses coming in at a later time, but the roads are not they are not equipped to handle that much traffic. And you guys are well aware of that. I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against on the annexation and the plan of services? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll consider for adoption Resolution 16R PS 61 to adopt a plan of services for approximately 36.9 acres along Asbury Road and Asbury Lane. Anthony King, DeCinda Malone, and Levi Grantham are the applicants. And this is for the plan of services.
If though it,
Go ahead.
did you have a question?
Yeah.
I'll make the motion.
I think just to be on the front side of it, being as Ms. Hayes has brought it up, the roads. Mr. Huddleston, would you like to comment on the roads? Because it's kind of like the chicken or the egg thing. It's those are county roads. The city has very little ability to go out there and improve a county road unless there's a reason to do so. And at the same time, I don't think the county is going to improve the situation if the city doesn't do something. And so, Sam, I think I'll open it up to you. I don't want to.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Smotherman, Mayor, members, council. Sam Huddleston with the City Engineering Department. I think we'll recall, if you, Mr. Smotherman will probably recall this public hearing at the Planning Commission meeting. I might like to clarify comments made by Ms. Hayes by saying that the council has not recognized any of those things. Those were statements that were made at the Planning Commission. Observations were made at the Planning Commission. The statement that the roads were F-, actually, that was a statement that I personally made about the intersection of Asbury Road at Medical Center Parkway and its condition for entering and exiting traffic. The F- was not necessarily the condition, but it was more tied to the delays.
The current condition of the intersection.
Current condition of the intersection and the amount of traffic delays that a person might encounter at that particular intersection at peak hour. And so I think that was the comment that's made. I do believe that's true, and I think that was based on traffic studies that were performed by the applicants for the rezoning. As a general rule, we're going to ask developers along substandard county roads to participate in the improvements to those roads. And that was something that was addressed in the annexation feasibility study. We discussed the conditions of Asbury Road and Asbury Lane and identified that those roads, particularly in front of this property, the subject property, would need to be addressed at the time of development. General intersection and general roadway issues that are some distance away from the proposed developed properties become more community issues and city and county and Department of Transportation issues. And that's the way I think I would characterize the intersection of Asbury Road and Medical Center Parkway as being a community issue and not an issue related to a specific development fronting on it. And the history of that, obviously, we remember goes back to the creation of the interchange for Medical Center Parkway and the construction of Medical Center Parkway from Thompson Lane to that particular point. And those are a couple observations I'll make in regard to the annexation feasibility study. If there were other questions, I'd be glad to hear those. And I'd be glad to go into more depth, in particular on the Asbury Lane intersection with Medical Center Parkway, if that's your pleasure.
I think that's good for me right now.
Okay.
I mean, we may ask you to come back.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Mayor and council members, if there are no other comments, I move for approval.
This would be the plan of services.
Plan
This
of
is the
services.
ordinance for the plan of services.
Second.
All right, Ms. Wright, for call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
I will now consider for adoption Resolution 16R861 to annex approximately 36.9 acres along Asbury Road and Asbury Lane and to incorporate the same within the corporate boundaries of the city of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Anthony King, DeSenda Moore, and Levi Grantham applicants 2016-518. Again, this is for the annexation.
Move for approval of the annexation.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, will call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now conduct a public hearing to consider zoning approximately 36.9 acres along Asbury Road and Asbury Lane as Planned Residential Development, PRD District, Kingsbury Development, simultaneous with annexation, Land Management Group, applicant 2016-455. Ms. Green.
Thank you, sir. As I mentioned, I back up to present to you the change request for the zoning of the property, and it's for the same property that you just considered for annexation and plan of services. The 36.9 acres located along Asbury Lane, Asbury Road, that's shown in the purple or pink color on the screen before you. You can see current city limits are the yellow color, and what you see in the yellow on the southwest corner is property that's zoned PRD, that's Planned Residential District, and that's the Perlingbrook development, which did consist entirely of townhome style developments, but now has recently been revised so that it also has some single family detached components in addition to the townhome type development. The property, as I think I mentioned before, is owned by the King and Grantham family, and the Land Management Group has a contract to purchase the property, and they wish to develop this property as a single family subdivision, so single family detached residential, and of course have asked for it to be located in the city to receive city services, and the annexation is what you just considered. The applicants have requested that the property be zoned to PRD, and that's Planned Residential District, and they provided a specific development plan for this project. This, of course, is a concept plan, and they will further work on the development plans for the property with preliminary and final plats at the Planning Commission. They've named this project Kingsbury, and so the Kingsbury PRD program book should have been couriered to you. A copy has also been included in the agenda packets for you to review. You can see from the program book that proposed are 156 single-family detached lots on the 35.9 acres, and has a density of just over 4 dwelling units per acre. There are 3 different lot sizes or mixes in this development, and each lot has a similar but different standards, so you can see that the minimum lot sizes, and all of them are 5,500 square feet. However, the widths vary, and in those varying widths, there are varying minimum house sizes. So the smallest lot is 41 feet wide, and with a minimum home size of 1,600 square feet, and then it goes up to 2,000 square foot minimum house size. And these homes are, there have been images provided to you in the program book of the proposed architectural style for these developments, and it's a very elaborate plan, and they've got a specific Main Street type development. Mr. Matt Taylor's going to come up in just a moment and present to you the development plan. It does focus around a rather large amenity, which is being committed to in phase 1 of the project. There's a phasing plan in the program book on page 9, and I have it on the screen, that shows the expected phasing of this development with the connection to Asbury Lane being in phase 1 and the connection to Asbury Road being in the very last phase, which is phase 5. The PRD does outline all the exceptions to the zoning ordinance, which are very standard. They are committing to keeping the driveways deep enough and wide enough to accommodate 4 cars, which is our minimum standard. So that was something that we insisted upon. There are some lots that will have a smaller front setback, 18 lots for the garage, but they've provided off-street parking area to mitigate the effect of those areas. The Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing on November 2nd, and at the public hearing, they are recommending to you that you do rezone this property to PRD simultaneous with the annexation. 5 voted in favor, and 1 of the Planning Commission members voted against the zoning change request. As I mentioned, I'm going to invite Mr. Matt Taylor to the lectern to present to you the program. If you have any questions regarding the zoning change request, I would be glad to answer them either before or after your public hearing.
Any questions? Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Good evening, Mayor McFarland, members of the council. I'm Matt Taylor of SEC here in town. I'm accompanied tonight by Mr. Greg Gamble, land planner on the project, as well as Mr. Ron Bankert from Crescent Homes, who is the developer and builder on the project. We're here tonight to present to you the Kingsbury development, as Ms. Green said, and do have a brief PowerPoint presentation for you, if we can get that on the screen. We'll start by just orienting you to the site. I think you already know it's about 36 acres, basically at the intersection of Asbury Lane and Asbury Road, which are to the north of Medical Center Parkway, kind of in this quadrant between 840, 24, and Murfreesboro Road. Most of the property is currently open pasture with some woods toward the south and southeast. The surrounding areas, as Ms. Green said, are almost entirely county. We do touch the city limits to the southwest at the Purlingbrook development. We do have a sort of loose partnership with Purlingbrook. They need potable water, which we will have access to on our eastern boundary. So we're going to take them water. And then we need sanitary sewer and storm drainage from them to get to the river, and they're going to provide that for us. Here's a look from the north side of the property toward the south. You can see the pasture work back into those woods toward the south end of the property. Some of the surrounding homes around our property. This is Asbury Lane from approximately where our entrance would be, looking to the north. The plan itself is a PRD zoning requested. We're proposing 156 homes on just under 36 acres. That is about a 4.4 units to the acre density, which is about a medium density for us in Murfreesboro. All of our utilities are proposed to be underground. We do have about 3 different ranges of home sizes, the minimum of those being 1,600, going up over 2,000 square feet in size. We're proposing 3 minimum lot sizes, a 41-foot wide, a 46-foot wide, and a 51-foot wide lot. Those lots are deeper than what we normally see. Those are about 140 feet deep. Most of the time we're seeing about 120 to 130. We wanted that extra backyard depth, especially with that full 35-foot front setback for the garage. We're attempting, where possible on the site, to preserve a buffer and green space between the back of our lots and our neighbors. Along the south, at the southeast corner there, we're not able to do that just because the existing property lines there are so narrow. But the rest of the site, we are able to achieve that. All of our homeowners will be required to be members of the HOA, which will be managed by a third-party association, which will collect fees, dues, and maintain the amenities, landscape, and an open space. In addition, in that southeastern quadrant of our property, there's an existing cemetery, and we have committed to preserving that cemetery and providing some supplementary parking in that area as well. We anticipate a mixture of 1- and 2-story homes within Kingsbury, a minimum of 1,600 square feet in size, as I mentioned previously. The setbacks we're proposing are fairly standard for what we're seeing in Murfreesboro. 35 feet to the garage on a front entry. We are allowing the option, if they want to recess that garage, we can pull the front of the house to within 15 feet, a 5-foot side, and a 20-foot rear. We have requested a shallower front setback on a handful of lots in that southeastern portion of the property because of the existing property dimensions here. However, we have attempted to make up for the lost parking by providing more parking at the cemetery. That will be able to be used by visitors to the cemetery as well as guests and our homeowners. The only vinyl that we're going to allow in Kingsbury is in the trim and soffit areas. We're going to have high quality materials, brick, stone, cement board siding. And we've tried to take some of the Charleston feel, which is where Crescent Homes is based out of, and merge that with local characteristics here in the Nashville market. and create a unique character of the homes. And we've proposed 3 different style of homes, essentially: a farmhouse, a classical, and a craftsman. Each of those has its own unique characteristics. We're doing some very unique things in the development, all architectural garages. Even here, for instance, you'll see that over the garage door, we're creating an arbor, as well as we're having deeper front porches and swings. Here you'll see an example of a wrap front porch. We've also got the separated garage doors at the 2-car garages, and another wrap porch. I hope that you see inside the pattern book, we've taken a lot of time and spent a lot of time on detail with this development. One of these examples is the mixture of lot sizes throughout. A lot of times you'll see a developer bring in one section that is all of a particular lot size. We've tried to integrate those throughout the development. That will help us not only on ability to sell different price point homes in each section, we also want to integrate the neighborhood rather than segregating it just because of price point of homes. In addition, we've committed to varying the home elevations throughout, so you can't have the exact same home directly next door or directly across the street from each other. Another one of our detail focuses what we call the special focus lots. The first one of those shown and designated with a circle are corner or multi-frontage lots. Here we are requiring that the side of those homes be treated architecturally like the front, and we're also encouraging the wrapped porches on those sides. Next are the homes at front on parks or open space. Here we're encouraging, again, 2-story homes. We also think that the floor plans should be selected that optimize the views out of the homes onto those parks. And then we're also encouraging full porch, stacked porch, and balconies to further enhance these areas. And lastly are the homes designated with a triangle inside the book. Those are terminating view homes. As you drive down the street, these are homes you're going to see at the end. So here we want to take special care to move the architectural mass of the house into the view shed, encouraging these to be 2-story homes rather than one, so that you've got a pleasant view as you drive down that street. Just some renderings of what we anticipate the streetscape to look like in this one. You can see the wrap front porch, the swing on the end, sidewalks throughout the development, and we have committed to street trees. Those street trees will be behind the sidewalk, so it's not to interfere with service delivery, but we did want to add those for pedestrian friendliness. And here's an example of those homes, those 2-story homes, with stacked porches and balconies overlooking the amenity center and the amenity center itself. The amenities, we think that they start at the front door. We've got a nicely well-landscaped median entrance off of Asbury Lane, which is what we intend to be our primary entrance. We'll also have an entrance sign at this location. Our second entrance will be off Asbury Road. This will be a little more low-key, but we're still going to landscape this entrance well, as well as the landscape between the road and the back of these lots to keep an ambiance along the road, but also protect our residents' backyard. Here's an example of the type of sign we anticipate to build. The amenity center itself, this is the main structured amenity within our development. It's located in Phase 1. It's at the heart of the development, and it will impact your visual observation as soon as you drive in to the development off Asbury Lane. Here we'll have a cabana next to the pool. You also have an outdoor fireplace and sitting areas, try to create those gathering areas, create that community feel. The pool has a wide deck area to provide for any parties or gatherings. And then the playground, I think that the playground itself is unique to Murfreesboro. We're incorporating all natural materials. In addition, instead of just throwing up a metal structure, we're building these berms that will kind of create rooms and play areas in themselves. So instead of walking up steps, you're walking up the berm and sliding down or climbing through a pipe to a tunnel to the next area. We're going to have decorative street lights and mailboxes throughout the development as well. Access, we do have 2 points of access, one on Asbury Road and one on Asbury Lane. We've also planned for a future extension to the east through a stub once that property develops. We did have a neighborhood meeting. I think it was very well attended, and I'll be happy to answer any questions now or after the public hearing.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll need to conduct a public hearing to consider zoning approximately 36.9 acres along Asbury Road in Asbury Lane as planned residential development. PRD District, Kingsbury Development simultaneous with annexation. Land Management Group applicant 2016-455. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading ordinance 16 OZ 61 to zone an area along Asbury Road and Asbury Lane as planned residential development PRD District, Kingsbury Development simultaneous with annexation. Land Management Group applicant 2016-455.
Hey, Sam, could I hit you up real quick again, Mr. Huddleston? So I share some concerns that Chairman Lamb had during the Planning Commission meeting that, you know, it's something that we just kind of talked about in our 5 o'clock meeting that, you know, if the infrastructure isn't there, it is kind of a chicken and the egg thing here, but, you know, what are the plans for the roads? What do we have in stone? What do we not have in stone as it relates to how we will, can, could, should deal with the road situation out there?
Thank you, Mr. LaLance and members of the council. Sam Huddleston again with the City Engineering Department. Put a map up on the screen, and I think this would be good to get some context, and we'll talk about a couple of issues, a couple of things about this property. One of the first things I'd like to maybe point out, and I'll circle a couple of spots. For the property that's located between I-24 Medical Center Parkway, Northwest Broad Street, and 840, there are essentially 4 exits out of that property. One on Old Nashville Highway to the north, and then 3 back into the Murfreesboro area on Old Nashville Highway, an existing subdivision road that comes onto Wilkinson Pike, and also Asbury Lane. The other thing I would say about those properties is, to date, the parcels you see in there, the development you see is all county development. Perlingbrook was annexed in the mid-2000s, but there's no residence there, and so those limitations on traffic are already there. What we have talked about internally, and I'm going to put another map up that gives us a little bit closer detail here. What we've talked about internally and at the Planning Commission meeting in November, this property has frontage on 2 existing county roads, and those particular roads will be addressed in the development plans. The entrance here on Asbury Lane, and then the frontage here on Asbury Road, and those will be addressed as with any development by the developer as those plans progress. I think the biggest issue that we've heard from the public hearing, and I think one of the biggest issues that staff's aware of on this development and really in this area is this particular intersection. The traffic study that was completed by the applicant confirmed our suspicions, and that intersection is performing very poorly, and there's no debate about that. It's something that, as engineers and planners, we recognized with the TDOT project, but we really just didn't have the ability to make it much different then. The TDOT intersection work actually improved its alignment and shifted it to the east, but it's still a very tough spot. We've been asked about signalizing that intersection, and unfortunately, it is too close to the interstate interchange, so a signal would perhaps cause conflicts on that interstate interchange and cause traffic to back up on the interstate. It's also too close to the existing Conference Center Boulevard signalized intersection, which is right here. When city staff and planning staff and city administration, when we saw the potential for the properties that were located along Medical Center Parkway, as this was envisioned many years ago, there were a couple of master plans drawn up. One master plan specifically for the Gateway area from I-24 back into town. And there were a couple of three options talked about for this particular parcel here, which we will call the Williamson Farm. And it basically envisioned an extension of Conference Center Boulevard. We didn't have that street named at that time, but some type of street connecting back to Med Center Parkway with connections at all of these stub streets. And you'll notice there are 5 or 6 stub streets into those neighborhoods. And then there was another concept, let me clear the screen, that included, again, an extension here, but something in this area for Wilkinson and something in this area for Asbury, allowing Asbury and Wilkinson then to tie back into a signalized intersection at Conference Center Boulevard and Medical Center Parkway. When we designed Medical Center Parkway and when we designed Conference Center Boulevard, we anticipated a fourth leg to that intersection. And if you go through that intersection, you might look and say, wow, that traffic signal pole base is 3 or 4 feet up in the air. Well, we've designed that intersection. We know the elevations where it needs to be, but we did not have the right-of-way at the time, and the property owner at the time wasn't ready for that construction. So we anticipated, we planned for it, but we have not yet constructed it. After the Planning Commission public hearing of November, we asked Weiser Company, who's working on the design of Wilkinson Pike, we asked them to come up with a couple of concepts to see from a road design standpoint what might work. And I'm going to sketch again here on the screen. They included one version of Wilkinson Pike and Asbury Lane really coming in fairly close to the intersection. And then a second version that actually push that further apart. Those were the two options we've looked at. We have not, I apologize to our city management team. We've discussed this with them, but I haven't shown them those concepts which came in over the Christmas break, but we'll do that. And to talk about the possibility of pursuing these options. Our concept is to perhaps consider one of those and pursue it with addition to the CIP and getting that on the program for construction in our normal CIP and roadway construction funding process, and that would be obviously coming back to the mayor and council for consideration in the next modification to the CIP. And I'm going to look to City Manager Lyons to confirm that we'll be updating that CIP with the 2017 borrowing package. And so that's where we're at on this failing intersection at Asbury Lane and Medical Center Parkway. And I'd be glad to discuss this further or entertain other questions about that.
But for clarification, we don't really have anything set in stone as it relates to these roads, right? I mean, or
As it relates, for clarification, as it relates to improvements of Asbury Lane and Medical Center Parkway, no. We're really at the conceptual design stage, and would be looking to move forward in the next few weeks to vet those designs, and then the acceptability of that design really with the property owners. There's a private property, a significant private property that we're all very aware of, that would need to cooperate with them to pursue these intersection improvements.
Yeah, well, you know, that, I guess, what is that, like a blue or purple line up there at the top, the arch, you know, somewhere in there holds water on the right-hand side of that too, so I mean, that, you know, you can see it back in there right now.
Sure, and the one of the observations, one of the attributes of this property is there is a very low area in the central part of the property, and we've observed that over the years. We have envisioned that Conference Center Boulevard and these roadways would need to be filled 2, 3, 4 feet perhaps to make their elevations correct for approaching Medical Center Parkway, and then also avoiding drainage conflicts with that property.
This may not have an answer, but it's hard to guess. But what would your best guess as to some improvement or relief? The future, where are we going? Where are we looking at some kind of relief in this area to have something having addressed this? 5 years?
If we're talking about the intersection, what I've sketched up here, Mr. Shacklett, on the screen, if we're talking about some intersection improvements with Medical Center Parkway, it could be within the next 2 years on a very aggressive schedule, and then and perhaps maybe 3, 4, 5 years if we delay that somewhat. What I think that I would share with you is we have a great group of consultants who are working on an update to our major thoroughfare plan. We've asked them specifically to look at not this property, but really this community and properties bound by Northwest Broad Street and I-24. There's a lot of existing development in there, a lot of traffic generated already, but there's not a lot of major road networks, and so this area appeared to us at the staff level to be one that we wanted them to look specifically at the road patterns and traffic counts and traffic capacity now. And so I would offer to you that we need also a more global look at not just the intersection, but really a road network plan that be included in recommendations to the major thoroughfare plan to address this area that's really north of Med Center Parkway, bounded by I-24 and Broad Street, really all the way into the Smyrna community.
That was the question I had. Is it possible to study getting, you know, from Conference Center Boulevard all the way back out to Florence Road? You know, if you just look through that overview, but that gives an access back to 41, an access back to 24, Blackman, the whole area there, that you know, a different area. But is that a possibility we could look at?
Yes, and I think Mayor McFarland, I think the map tells us a whole lot about where some of those road networks have to go. 840 is controlled access, I-24 is controlled access, and so we're only going to have a couple of places where we could interact with those. 840 between I-24 and Broad Street, it has one crossing. That's Old Nashville Highway. So if we're going to move more traffic out of this area northward, it's going to have to be with either a new crossing or perhaps with an improvement to Old Nashville Highway bridge over Interstate 840. And then I will remind you that our major thoroughfare plan currently envisions an interchange on I-24 really between Almoville Road and State Route 840. In talking with our traffic consultant about that particular interchange, that'll be one that'll also get looked at. That was an extension of Veterans Parkway, really from its current intersection with Burnt Knob Road.
you know, if you run that road, if that road does get out there across 840 to the Florence Road area, that happens to come in pretty close to where Cherry Lane will come in from the, you know, I guess from the north and east. You know, when it crosses over 840 and comes around through there, if that, you know, as far as the drawings go, it'd be pretty nice to be able to connect those dots.
Absolutely, and again, the map is telling us a whole lot, and our current road plan is telling us a whole lot. You know, we have some natural and some man-made barriers through there, Overall Creek, CSX Railroad, and the interstates are going to be those barriers to putting them where we want to. But I think that something that might see Cherry Lane extended into that area as an element of the major thoroughfare plan probably has some merit, and that would perhaps connect us back into 840 and the sort of the north side of town, but also give us the ability perhaps to see that extended to a new interchange on I-24 in the future. And that's really long-term transportation planning. That's what our major thoroughfare plan does for us, and it allows us to identify those needs, prioritize those needs, and then pursue those needs as we can.
Going forward, how long will it take us to? I mean, what do you think the timeline? I mean, I know there's a crystal ball, but how do you see this process moving forward?
As far as the intersection improvements on Medical Center Parkway, what I would envision, a Medical Center Parkway and Asbury Lane, I would envision that we will meet with the city administration and vet the two concepts, and then take some direction from the city manager and our traffic and planning and engineering team, as well as our consultant, and then we would see a game plan from there about pursuing one of those two options. Certainly it's got to involve the private property owner, and I've also envisioned, Mayor, that we could approach this in a minimalist fashion by designing and building just what's needed today, leaving the balance of that to maybe be addressed later by development. I think a better approach for us would be a public-private partnership where we see Conference Center Boulevard extended in what it really needs to be, and I think that needs to be a four-lane median divided roadway that matches Conference Center Boulevard on the opposite side, along with a potential for a signalized intersection somewhere north where we would intersect Wilkinson Pike and Asbury Lane. Repeating maybe a statement I made to Mr. Shacklett, aggressively 2 years, conservatively 3 to 4 to 5 years.
Let me ask Mr. Taylor, what is the build out of the 5 phases of this? What is that? I know it's market driven, but
yes, sir. We would anticipate starting infrastructure construction, I would say in about 90 to 120 days from tonight if it was approved. And then, so you're probably looking at starting to build homes later on this year. And it's probably about a 4 to 5 year build out. That's about 30 to 40 homes a year. That's fairly aggressive in a single neighborhood.
What concerns did the Planning Commission have with this? Anybody on it?
The minutes just said that the chairman voted against it because he thought it was too dense.
I just didn't know if any other comments.
Yeah, they voted for it.
Yeah, the majority voted for it. There was one vote that I don't know his reason why he did or didn't vote for him. I didn't discuss it with him, but was it a 6-1 vote or 1 vote?
Yeah, 5-1. He said it was density. He thought the density was too high for your property.
And I think well, I can't speak for the rest of the commission, but I felt like the quality of the development probably allowed for the increase in density, or at least the somewhat consideration of the density. So it's just.
well, you know, I think Eddie made a good point initially, is that what comes first, the chicken or the egg? How do we develop roads system? If it's in the county and we wouldn't naturally go out there and improve a road that's in the county. It's their responsibility. But if we have development going in out there, then the inclination is to address it. We're looking at a pretty big connector. This project to connect these roads and make this whole area traffic flow better is going to take a massive look at it, and I think we, the city, are in a position to do that, to look at it in a long-term, 20,000 foot, as we're looking here, perspective as to how we flow into a vibrant economic area of our community, Medical Center Parkway, and this whole area. It will improve traffic for county residents and city residents. I think it's a good thing that we're considering this and trying to make some improvement. And I don't know how it would get, if we left this property as it is. I don't know what the incentive would be to improve the traffic in this area. And I think the likelihood of anything getting better out there without the city's involvement is pretty slim. So I move that we approve.
Second.
And I just have one thing, Mr. Huddleston. Now that we have a motion, a second, I know that no one has a crystal ball that knows what's going to be going out there, but I really think when you look at how maybe the private public partnership that, trying to get with the county and finding a way to maybe drill down some areas where there's the opportunity that we can partner with the county to improve Asbury Lane and be able to look at all of those options together. So I would say anything that we can do to help with that, and if we need to talk with Mayor Burgess or some of those things, I think that would be something that we would definitely need to look at. And it's, again, the development brings along part of that infrastructure work that will allow it to sustain.
Yeah, I'd like to ask one question, and Sam, this would be for you also. I mean, my only, I have a little bit of hesitation with the not having any kind of commitment on getting out of there. I think ultimately we'll try to figure out something that helps that situation, so I feel okay about that. The one thing that I would, my preference would be that we would understand and have a pretty good knowledge that what we do with this piece of property doesn't keep us from being able to connect from, call it south to north where we need to connect, without running through a zigzag neighborhood to get from here out to another major roadway. Just looking at the map, it doesn't look like it would veer over there and go through there if there ever was a way to get through there, but can you give me some certainty that you feel like what we're doing here today wouldn't cause us an issue down the road?
And I think, Mr. LaLance, the observation you made that this work probably needs to go ahead regardless of the plans on Kingsbury. Kingsbury itself is not significant enough property, and it's not located in what I would call an ideal route for something to go northward. And so it's really independent. And that's why I say that we're holding the developer accountable for what they're responsible for, and that's their frontage. But the question about Asbury Lane, Wilkinson Pike, and Conference Center Boulevard and Medical Center Parkway is really a community question. And it's really something that rises to the level that it does need to be looked at the major thoroughfare plan level and at the CIP level, and as a prioritization recommendation from staff to council that we pursue those. This is a very important property in our community. It has a very potential significant future, and so I think you're exactly right that we do need to see a more comprehensive plan for this area going. Connecting really Med Center Parkway with that 840 Old Nashville Highway area.
So like on that north boundary where we will have the road frontage that will be annexing and, that we could improve if we wanted to, I guess kind of one of the questions would be, I just want to make sure, are we doing anything like we're allowing the backyards to get so close to the road that there's never going to be any chance that we ever widen Asbury? That kind of thing is what I'm wanting to make sure we're not cutting off our nose in spite of our face, as we know we're going to need more capacity, if that's the right word,
We'll
all
need
out
more
through there.
room. And I'll borrow a long-used concept from Mr. Richardson, our former transportation director. You got to have two things for a road, and one of them is a place to build it. So what you're reinforcing tonight is we need to maintain the place to build these future road improvements. And the second thing we're going to have is funding to build it with. And so the first thing we're looking at with a plan, major thoroughfare plan, or a particular plan about development is there adequate place to build the improvements? And then the second thing we always address with that is how do we fund it? Who participates? Where does it show up on our priorities? And so the development plan and the development team have not created a situation that would interfere with the northbound connection.
Not just the northbound connection, but I'm talking about the north boundary of this property.
That's right, and the north
Like,
boundary
so-
as well.
So Asbury Road,
Across, yeah.
you know, where it goes from east to west or west to east, whatever way you want to look at it, you know, these backyards are kind of going to get pressing up there, and you can see Asbury Road's going to connect over to Old Nashville Highway. I'm just kind of trying to make sure that this particular, you know, it looks like it won't to the north if we do a south-north, but also will it keep Asbury Road from ever being anything other than a two-lane road is what I'm trying to get at,
So
too.
we've envisioned Asbury Road with the design team. We've envisioned that to be, and they're setting aside on their property enough right-of-way to increase that to a 3-lane roadway.
Perfect.
Do those, Mr. Taylor, do those houses on that north boundary, do they face Asbury, or are they into the development?
No, sir. Everything is internal to the development. We've got green space along the southern right-of-way of Asbury, and that'll be in addition to the right-of-way we'll be dedicating to the city with this
Is
project.
that the 30-foot, or what?
Off the top of my head, I would say it's in the 25 to 30-foot range of green space. The right-of-way will either be dedicating at least 25 feet, maybe 30 feet, whichever one staff wants there. And along with that, we'll dedicate easements for construction and slope in that same area for that future rebuild as well.
Thanks a lot. Sorry to ask those questions after.
I will say that we're looking at it from the city of Murfreesboro's perspective, but we're also looking at it because we're all citizens of Rutherford County as well. And I think there's the opportunity purely, when we look at the 30,000-foot view here, we see that there are open fields there that have the ability to have roadways built in them without anybody's house being moved currently. And so I think the opportunity's there now. I think now's the time that we need to be taking action on this roadway. And but there's really no incentive to do it other than from the Rutherford County perspective of saying, let's build this really nice roadway out through Rutherford County unless these projects are approved. And I think that once services are available and sewage is available and all the city services are available, the majority of this property that is open space there will probably be developed as city projects. And so once the services are in place, I think that this is just kind of the start of the whole concept. But I don't think that without if we don't have somebody committing to saying we're going to build out there, I don't think there's really incentive for the city to ever fix the problem. And I know the comment was made earlier that if somebody gets killed, it's kind of on our hands. Well, if we don't approve it and somebody gets killed, I guess it's still on our hands because we're Rutherford County residents and we didn't do anything about it as well. So I do think that there's the justification to go ahead and get the process started. Not only, I think the point is we're not approving this with the concept that we're going to leave the situation like it is. And so I think that with that commitment involved, I think that, I think there's a sincere effort going to be made to resolve the problem and hopefully make the situation much safer for Rutherford County and Murfreesboro.
Ms. Wright, we have a motion and a second. If you'll call the roll, please.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Pursuant to Resolution 16R PH33 adopted by the City Council on November 17, 2016, will conduct a public hearing to consider 1. Adoption of a plan of services for an annexation of 34.3 acres and 2. The zoning of approximately 34.3 acres along Osborne Lane, which had been proposed to be annexed to the City of Murfreesboro, Tennessee as Single-Family Residential 12 RS12 District and Single-Family Residential 10 RS10 District. John Beckham, Throneberry II Irrevocable Trust, Allison Throneberry Camp, and Conrad Camp applicants. 2016-517, 2016-454. Notice that the said public hearing was published in the December 26, 2016 issue of a local newspaper. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Good evening, Mayor McFarland and members of council. Our next public hearing tonight has to do with the annexation plan of services and annexation petition for property located along the north side of Osborne Lane. And you can see on the map before you that it is in the blue color. It's 33.5 acres of private property, and we've also included some right-of-way along Osborne Lane and Mary Beth Court. Mary Beth Court is a small county cul-de-sac. It's actually not a cul-de-sac. It's platted as a cul-de-sac, but what we are looking to annex of Mary Beth Court was never actually constructed. So the 0.8 acres total of right-of-way bring the requested area to 34.3 acres. We have conducted a plan of services and a annexation study on the property. The plan of services shows that we will be able to provide services to the subject property. I did want to mention, we always talk about the 10-foot strips that we have to end up using in order to prevent there from being islands of county in the city limits. You'll notice at the very northwestern corner of the property, there's a 10-foot strip identified. And basically what that's doing is the property to the south of the subject property would be entirely surrounded by the city limits if we did not leave a gap, a 10-foot gap, if you will, at that corner of the property. So that is how we are preventing the property to the south from being completely surrounded by the city limits. But with that being said, as I mentioned, the plan of services shows that we will be able to provide services upon annexation to the subject property. The Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing on this matter on November 2nd and unanimously recommends its approval. After the public hearing, the first item that you'll be voting on will be the plan of services, and then the next item will be the annexation petition itself. And then after that, I'll get up and give a presentation on the companion zoning request. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding the annexation of this property.
Okay, we'll now need to conduct a public hearing on the plan of services for an annexation of approximately 34.3 acres located along Osborne Lane. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium.
My name is Jeff Hutchison. I live on 713 Sander Drive. It's my mother's home. She's lived there since 1978. We're not against the development. Our concern is we're on the northern end of the property, is that area, there's actually a pond there. And it's also a part of that flood zone there. Originally, when we moved there in 78, they were going to build houses back there, and for some reason they stopped. I think it has something to do with that flood zone area. That pond has water in it now. And even now, Tennessee, back when I was a teenager, we never had water come onto our property. But now, in the last few years, I've noticed at times when we have a lot of rain, about an inch or two, a bit of water comes onto our property. And then our neighbors to our west, their area usually has, like the rain we had recently, there's standing water there. And then on the property in that area right by the creek, there's usually some standing water if there's rain. So you've got this pond. And so I'm concerned that the fact that it's on R10, which means you put more houses in that specific area compared to on the other side of the creek where you have an R12. My concern is if you have to develop it and raise it above the flood zone, then that water's got to be pushed somewhere, which means it may come onto my mother's property, but definitely will be put onto my neighbor's property unless the drainage pushes that water back toward the property. Now, we're not against the annexation or the property being developed. It's just that that is a concern because there's an actual pond there. And then the surrounding land there, also standing water at times. That's what my neighbor to the west of us told me, because him and his son went on there just to see what, and he said he stepped there and the water was standing there, and then as well as the creek, or I mean the pond. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Hutchison, can you tell us, I didn't hear the street that you're...
713 Sandra Drive.
Sandra Drive.
Yes.
Okay, all right, we just want to make sure that we note that, not for the for the drainage. It's my fault, I didn't hear well. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll consider for adoption Resolution 16R PS 63 to adopt a plan of services for approximately 34.3 acres along Osborne Lane, John Beckham Throneberry 2 Irrevocable Trust, and Allison Throneberry Camp, applicants 2016-517.
Could we have somebody address the drainage?
Mr. Huddleston?
Thank you, Mr. Shacklet. Regarding the annexation and the feasibility study, this Bear Branch runs through the middle of the subject property. You might recall that a few years ago we did a joint funded project with the Corps of Engineers to restudy Bear Branch. That study was funded half by the Corps of Engineers and half by the City of Murfreesboro Stormwater Fund. The results of that study were shared with FEMA, who is updating the flood maps for the Stones River watershed. All that being said, we have a very good picture, a very good model, a very good handle on the floodplain and flooding associated with Bear Branch. It's also a water of the state, which means it receives special protections. And the development plan, although this is straight zoning, the development plan will have to honor the floodplain. It'll have to honor the water of the state issue, and it will we will review that in very, very good detail with the developer at the time of preliminary plat, and I'm very confident that they could rezone this property or develop this property and not increase the degree of flooding on the neighbors, and also protect the stream as the water of the state.
Well, I guess a little assurance from Mr. Hutchison. You cannot develop on a property and send your water to your neighbor.
That's right. As a private property, many of the county subdivisions and city subdivisions include a drainage network, drainage easements, which preserve some rights for drainage from adjacent properties onto those properties. But absent that, your statement is very true. And I did look in particular at the 2 or 3 lots he asked about, the 713, and then the 2 or 3 properties to the west, and I'm confident that those would not be impacted by a development plan here.
Mr. Huddleston, those properties that you just mentioned, they are already in the floodplain, though, aren't they?
A portion of them, I believe, are. I'm not sure that that the gentleman that spoke, I'm sorry, Mr. Hutchinson.
Yeah, I'm not sure which house he is, but some of the properties that touch this that are coinciding with the property line.
Yes, but some of the lots on Sandra Drive are currently in the floodplain.
I think the plus to this is oftentimes at the Planning Commission level, we find that once property is developed and it's no longer an open field, the person who's developing the property, they're trying to move the water to wherever the spillway is and get the water moving. If you've got water that's standing between 2 properties and the property line runs between them, it's usually a situation where you can't drain a half a puddle. If you drain one side of the properties, you usually help the person on the other side because you usually drain their water as well. So I think there's there's also the opportunity not only to be concerned about making the matter worse, there's potential of improving the situation with a good design plan.
And I think that's a good observation. We've had the ability over the years to address many flooded fields or flooding problems with the help of a development plan who gave us access to their development plan, and we could enhance and improve drainage on adjacent properties and that. And we always look for that opportunity in a situation like this.
Yeah, standing water, I guess, in a field is one thing, but standing water in a neighborhood is certainly a tremendous different problem.
Yes.
And so I think there's always that incentive for whoever's developing that property to make sure that any standing water is mitigated as best they possibly can. So I think
that's correct.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now consider for adoption Resolution 16R 8063 to annex approximately 34.3 acres along Osborne Lane and to incorporate the same within the corporate boundaries of the city of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. John Beckham Throneberry II Irrevocable Trust and Allison Throneberry Camp applicants 2016-517.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call them.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now need to conduct a public hearing to consider zoning approximately 34.3 acres along Osborne Lane as single-family residential 12 RS12 district, 16.4 acres, and single-family residential 10 RS10 district, 17.9 acres, simultaneous with annexation. Conrad Camp applicant 2016-454.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. It's for the same property. We just considered the annexation and plan of services. The area to the south of Bear Branch Creek in the blue is the area that they've requested for RS12, single-family residential district with minimum lot sizes of 12,000 square feet. And the area north of Bear Branch, which is in the purple color, is what they have requested for the RS10 zoning district, single-family residential district with a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. They have made this request, and it's generally consistent with the surrounding zoning classifications in the area. When you look around the map that's on the screen, you can see to the east, the Meadowwood subdivision is RS10, 12, and 15. To the south, there's RS12 in the Hamptons. To the west, there's RS12 with the Reserve subdivision, and PRD to the northwest in the Valley Brook subdivision, which is kind of several different types of a little bit more dense residential development there. But the requested zoning classifications, I believe, were requested specifically because they were consistent with what was in the area. It's difficult to predict how many lots specifically could be developed on the subject property because of the presence of Bear Branch and not knowing whether or not there would be a crossing or not. But with that being said, the Planning Commission did conduct a public hearing and recommends the zoning of this property to RS10 and 12 simultaneous with annexation. They made that recommendation unanimously at its November 2nd regular meeting. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Taylor is here representing the applicant if you have any questions for him.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Okay, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this zoning request, please come to the podium. Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Consider for passage on first reading ordinance 16OZ63 to zone an area located along Osborne Lane is single-family residential 12 RS12 district 16.4 acres and single-family residential 10 RS10 district 17.9 acres, simultaneous with annexation. Conrad Camp, applicant, 2016-454.
No questions, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now consider recommendations of the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. We have 4 items to schedule public hearings. All of those were handled easily in one night at the January 4th Planning Commission meeting, and the Planning Commission then, after those 4 public hearings, recommended approval. I won't bother reading them. They're on the agenda, but staff would recommend a March 2nd public hearing date for all 4 items. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Plumley. We'll consider recommendations of the Chief of the of Police regarding purchase of police vehicles and equipment.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. I'm here tonight seeking the purchase of 25 patrol vehicles for the Murfreesboro Police Department. The fiscal funds for this purchase would be through department savings and fund balance. The 50 patrol vehicles, what the outlook looks like right now, we're in need of 50 patrol vehicles for take-homes. It would replace 12 cars. What we're in need of is 12 cars currently. And there's additional 15 pool cars that are needing replacement forthcoming, which brings the total to around 78. We have currently 12 vehicles on hand and 15 that are on order, which is 27. Then it brings the total number of vehicles needed for the department right to 50. The purchase of these additional 25 cars would bring the needed vehicles down to 25. And I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
I'd met with Chief Duran, Deputy Chief Bowen, and discussed vehicles. They had shared with me they had a need for 50. We had 25 in the budget, but we had an outstanding fiscal year this past year, as you heard in the finance retreat. And I encouraged Chief Durr to come forward with the other 25 vehicles that were needed this year.
And Chief Dirk, for just kind of overall purposes, how do you come up with a how many cars do you need scenario? I mean, this is something that allows our officers some benefits, right, and helps them be better officers for our citizens, correct?
Yeah, yes, sir. We take a look at those people that are currently eligible. They have to reside within the county of Murfreesboro. And that's currently 15, and we have another 8 people coming eligible that reside in the same area coming July 3rd. Then we also looked at the cars that are forthcoming in mileage and their wear and tear, and that's how we looked at the cars that are needing replacement, and that's how we got the number of 15.
Chief, let me clear up something you said. You said the county of Murfreesboro.
Well, I'm sorry, sir.
With take-home cars, are they allowed to carry them home if they live in the county, or are they allowed to take them home if they live in the city, or both?
It's if they reside within the county of Rutherford, excuse me.
Okay, that's fine. I think it's a win-win situation. It disperses cars out so that if you have a tornado or something like that where you have an event, you don't have all your cars sitting at one station, that if the tornado were to hit that situation, you lose all your cars in one spot. By diversifying and spreading them out, it's a win for the police department. It's a win for the coverage to the community. I think it's a benefit to the police officers to have the take-home cars, so it's a win-win-win. So if there's no other comments, I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Had asked Mr. Lyons to come, no, keep, when we, had his year-end staff leadership team, he put together a list of all the things that had happened in 2016, and when you sit there, you just sort of shake your head. So I know Mr. Lyons wanted to share this with us, and I know you'll do it expeditiously, right?
I was hoping this was going to be a short meeting.
Yeah. I will do my best. Much was accomplished, and as I wrote, we really do have a lot to be proud of. City Council and our team have continued to deliver excellent services for our residents and meet the demands of growth. We had a number of projects: police headquarters, communication towers, Miracle Field, the First Methodist Franklin Synergy, and more. We welcome Mr. Wade to the City Council, and the leadership team added Gary Whitaker and Robert Holtz to new roles, and Carl Durr, Paul Boyer, and Jim Kerr also joined us. So if you would bear with me, I'm going to be, got a quick PowerPoint. Now, in your packet, you've got a detailed list. We'll put that detailed list on the website. So, in order that I didn't feel like I was reading to everybody, and for our residents at home, in January we started off the year with the mayor's run. It was quite cold. Also in January, Robert Holtz was named Building and Codes Director. Gary Whitaker was named Planning Director. The Parks and Recreation Department cleaned up at the RPA Awards. Matthew Blomley received his AICP certification. The General Assembly approved a bill that reduced the required number of readings for City Council from 3 to 2. I know we appreciate that. The city hired Farrer and Bates to serve as lobbyist. We began evaluation study of MED, and the Judicial Center construction plans were reviewed. Hard to believe a year ago we were reviewing plans, and the brick is going up on that. In February, the city earned its 5th consecutive budget award from GFOA. Carl Durr was named police chief. We began the historic bottom study. Murfreesboro Water and Sewer earned a perfect score of 599 points out of a possible 599 points. Quite an achievement for the department. The Miracle Field had a groundbreaking. We went live with Kronos. Firehouse Subs gave us a grant, and we hired Cumberland Securities as our financial advisor. In March, we'll certainly won't forget MTSU's big victory against Michigan State. Moody's upgraded the city's bond rating to AA1. We issued $79 million worth of general obligation bonds. Jim Kerr was named Transportation Director. We started with a new software for our finances and budget called Munis. We approved a wine in the grocery store ordinance, and we also fought off some de-annexation bills. There's the debt rating. In April, we welcomed John Kreis as our first head tennis professional. Franklin Synergy, we had a visioning workshop on that. The Community Technology Center was approved. Fire and Rescue unveiled a new MTSU branded fire engine. We also rolled out a new Engine 3 that featured the MTSU logo, and the Broad and Memorial retaining walls were revised. In May, we launched a new website for the Better Borough. The airport got new flight simulator building. Brinkley Drive design contract was approved. We had a joint meeting with the Power Board. You remembered Mary Huda? And the yard waste volumes went up substantially, and we were working 6 days a week. In June, we broke ground on the police headquarter building. Let's see, Chief Chrisman, Commissioner Jones, and Chief Durr. The design guideline project kicked back off. We closed Middle Tennessee Boulevard for a short while. The city's drone program was recognized at the TML conference. Council was meeting at Patterson Community Center at that point while we renovated this room. The city signed a letter of intent to acquire Franklin Heights, which is now the Doug Young Training Center. Jennifer led an arts and economic prosperity study. We reopened the West Main Fuel Island. In July, Lanny Goodwin announced his retirement. MTSU competed in the ESPY's Best Upset category. We filled the tree climber position. We closed on West Park, the McDonald property. We opened up Fire Station 10. Sprouts opened up. Murfreesboro Police Department was reaccredited. Chris Lilly earned a special designation after going through a training program at Rutgers. And we attempted the world's largest square dance. In August, Ron Washington retired. Mayor McFarland was named to the Major League Soccer Organizing Committee. The city won its 18th consecutive Excellence in Financial Reporting Award. We began our solid waste study. Fire Rescue had a memorable promotional ceremony held in this room. We also recognized all of our STARS winners. We also approved a traffic signal at Barfield and Veterans Parkway. MTech Kasai opened up in the Gateway, a new corporate headquarters, and we refunded $27 million in bonds and saved $2 million. In September, we had a swearing in. Mr. Wade Shacklet, Mr. Smotherman. We received a grant for $250,000 from the Christy Houston Foundation for Miracle Field. That was our first retreat, was in September. We continue our retreats. And Fire and Rescue, this one was certainly one of the more significant accomplishments of the year, expanded its level of care. In October, we approved a new food truck ordinance. We had to remove some trees at the airport. City TV won a number of national awards. FedEx announced a project here in Murfreesboro. Chief Durr changed some policies that allowed our officers to work events at MTSU. Weiser began a study of the Medical Center Parkway and Gateway Boulevard intersection. And the Jordan soccer practice facility was under construction. Oops. Getting ahead of myself here. In October, Murfreesboro Water and Sewer was named Utility of the Future. Senior Center competed in the Mindbender Games. We had a legislative retreat. The solid waste study kicked off. We approved a panhandling ordinance. Tracy Wilkins announced his retirement. In November, we had the dedication of the Doug Young Public Safety Center. Doug English was named Firefighter of the Year by the Exchange Club. Tennessee Journalism Hall of Fame inducted John Hood. We began using a maintenance program here called Facility Dude, which has been a more efficient way for us to process improvements and service requests. And in December, certainly proud of our fire and rescue personnel that went to Gatlinburg to assist in the fire. Cherry Lane had its community meeting, and we approved an addition to Black Fox. Now, a year can't go by, Mayor. I'll be brief and finish up here. Without us having a little bit of fun, and when you work together with everybody, things happen that make us laugh. So our chief of police texted me one day and said, Mr. Lyons, I need to tell you about a developing situation at one of our high schools. When I show you the next picture, you'll realize how he misspelled the name of one of our high schools. Because what he said to me was, we have I know we lived by the beach a long time, but that, Mayor, certainly, we are so proud of the support that you provide our employees, salaries, benefits, things in the budget, training opportunities. We work well together as a team, and I know our residents want that and deserve that, and we will continue to do as much as we can. And when you step back and look at what's done in a year's time, it was significant what was accomplished in 2016, and we're glad to share this list with you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. We're proud of the staff and all those who worked to accomplish everything. All right, we'll now consider for adoption Resolution 17R04 to request the Tennessee General Assembly to amend the Private Act constituting Murfreesboro City Charter to be provided prior to a council meeting. Well, I don't know why I read that, but it's late, so.
Mayor and Council, before you is a resolution that is pursuant to your request to amend the charter with respect to appointments to council members. Just a brief review of the resolution. Section 1 Also amends, in reviewing the charter provision as it stands now on replacement of council members, we did notice that the filling of a vacant mayoral position is by appointment as well, and so taking from the council what their prior discussion was, that is suggested to be changed so that the vice mayor now holds a position as an interim until a special election is held. If the special election is prior to 180 days from the election, it's a much more standard process across the state and the city to have, although there are variances, to have that type of situation as opposed to a mayoral vacancy by council appointment. Sections 2 and 3 does clean up some language. In 2014, council adopted an ordinance that changed the city's election dates, and the language of the charter wasn't changed at that point in time. So there's some changes to the charter provisions that align the charter language with the election dates as they are now. Section 4 amends the appointment, or amends the process for filling a vacancy on council, changing it right now from the council's option to fill it by appointment to filling by appointment or by a special election, again, if the vacancy occurs within 180 days from the next general election. With that, if you have any questions, happy to answer.
I have a couple of questions. On the filling of the vacancies, our wordage here is that city council may elect to fill a vacant council seat in that area. That language, legally, when you say city council may, the word may means that the council will have the option to leave it vacant also, right? That word may means that we can leave it vacant?
That's correct, Councilmember.
Okay, my second question is, if the vacancy occurs more than 180 days, that means that 6 months, after 6 months, we can still appoint. Is that correct?
That's true. The 180 days is, the way it's written, 180 days would apply to calling a special election. The intent being that we don't call a special election isn't called an expense incurred for a special election when another election is coming up in a relatively short period of time. So 6 months was what we picked to put in there. Council prefers another time period, we can certainly adjust that. But it's a 6-month period of time. Okay. In that meantime, council can choose to do an appointment if they chose to, or leave the seat vacant.
Right, so in the future, so that's saying in 6 months, if we have 6 months, there's no need for an election, we can appoint, well, whatever council members are here can appoint.
Right.
Okay, also my question is, determined by affirmative vote. Yeah, I understand that. Also in that area, the way it's reading, the special election, if we go special election, that's a win-win. And if we go by appointment, that's a majority rule only. So we're saying, okay, we know if appointment, of course, the majority rules. But if we have an election, the majority, of course, will rule on the council. But if we have a tie, that automatically goes to a special election, the way you have it worded. If it's a tie among us, we automatically go to a special election?
No.
Okay. Can you explain that?
What the affirmative vote language in there is the choice of which option to select.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's a tie vote, there'd be no option, the position would remain vacant.
So if the option failed, you still have the option of either saying we want to have an election or we want to leave it vacant. Either one, correct?
Say the question, if it was a tie vote?
If it's a tie vote on the council appointing, then you could either vote on
if it's a tie
either
vote,
or option, leave it vacant, or have a special election. If you had a tie vote, it would fail for lack of a majority vote. So
for a lack, and then you could bring in another motion, right? True.
And another thing that we're changing here, either way we go, I know last week we were talking about the person, if we go, they have to run and then run again, but our new terminology here is if either win by appointment or by election, they now don't have to run again, they just stay the remainder of that term, right?
What you're referring to, Councilmember, is the state statute, which puts us into that double
Right.
election where a person runs in May and then runs again in August. And by having the special election permitted in our charter, that's the exception of the statute. So that takes us out of that statutory requirement. And so now, with this provision, if we were to appoint or a special election, they would fill the remainder of they would fill until the next election, and then they would fill the remainder of the term. So you wouldn't have that May-August situation that might arise.
I guess those are my questions in that section.
You got more?
No, I'm finishing that section.
So if we were to appoint before the legislators approve this, we would still have to do the May and August election?
I would say more than likely. That's a difficult question to answer if you were to appoint now, because we would have a charter provision at a point in time where we would face an election period of time that would allow us to do a special election. So it's a difficult question probably just to answer. I don't think it's ever been tested, not that I've seen.
At least this clears us up for the future issues, right? I mean, where we won't have to deal
Absolutely.
with this. We'll have more in the future. We're going to have more choices. We're going to have kind of cleaner choices via this language, right? I mean, that's the idea.
Yeah, you'd have more choices, and you'd be exempt from the statute that would put you in the possibility of that May-August elections situation.
Mr. Kendall, I'd like for you to clear one thing up for me. If we were to appoint, there would be no vacancy. Therefore, the state law wouldn't kick in, because the state law says if there's a vacancy to a position, that it would be filled in the next election. Is that your interpretation of it, or would you still have to have that?
Right. What the state law says, if you fill the position by appointment, then that seat would be up at the next regular election, and the next regular election for this seat would be May 2nd of 2018, and then that person who was elected would fill the remainder of the term, which would only put them to August 2nd of 18. So there would only be less than a 3-month period of time where they'd be serving.
So the person would not have to run
They'd have to run in both elections if we were.
or 3 months.
They would
Sorry,
have.
it's late and I'm just kind of confused.
Yeah. They would.
If we appoint, let's say we appoint,
Right.
that person will stay on the council until May of 2018.
Right.
In 2018, that person would run.
If they chose to run, they would have to run.
Choose to run. And then run again in August?
Right.
So 3 months later, run again.
Yeah. Probably less than 3 months because
Yeah.
of certification of the election.
And technically, if that was the route, you would have, you possibly could be qualified for 2 elections that are going on at the same time for the same seat, theoretically. You'll have to fill out a qualifying petition to run in May, as well as the qualifying petition would be filled out sometime while you're campaigning for the August election.
For the August election, right.
Yeah.
Let's say I was appointed. I'm on the council until May of 2018. I run 2018 and I lose. Then a new person will come on for less than 3 months. That's what we're saying. It's strange.
No, if you were elected to serve, you would serve the remainder of the term.
No, I'm saying if you all appoint me on the council right now, I'm on the council until May of 2018.
Correct.
Okay, I decide I like it. I'm going to put my name in the hat and run, and I lose. So whoever wins comes on the council for less than 3 months.
Correct.
Potentially, if they
That's the
didn't
way it
run
would
for
work under existing statute, but now,
Without the
without the change in the,
Right.
in the charter, but with this,
It may still happen this time, but it won't happen
it
like
won't
that
happen.
in the future.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, if we waited for the appointment until the charter was changed, clearly it wouldn't
Yeah.
happen this time.
right.
Yeah, gotcha.
And we're talking, I think they said within 30 days, we could probably get this through. 30 to 60 days at the most at the legislature. Have you gotten any feedback as to how long it would take to do that? I think some of our representatives said last week it would be in a relatively short, they would fast track it down there. So they're in session, and so it would be a relatively quick turnaround within 120 days. So we could have an election in May if we choose this option.
Speaking of that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'd heard they're there, they take a couple of weeks. Are they taking a couple of weeks?
They were
off?
appointing committees this week. I think they come back in about 2 weeks.
So-
They've gone to subcommittee.
The 20th, I think, is when he's submitting his.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like,
They were making committee appointments yesterday and today, I think. So now that the committees are appointed, they'll come back in about 2 weeks and go into the real work of the General Assembly.
I think, I'm sorry.
I just think, in given some time frame, if the election is the option, I think sometime in sometime in May, we could have an election. And, but of course, I don't think the figures changed. I think they're still saying it's at $61,000.
well,
Minimum.
we still, this will just give us the option.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right. That's right.
And then we still got to have another discussion on that, but what we might do is if we get this approved, then we can send it up and get a little more clarity on how fast, again, as more of a solid ETA.
So
and then we
you're
can kinda
not,
start our-
we're not willing to have that, we don't need to have that discussion.
I will do that, but if you'll let me, I'll make a motion on this particular piece. We'll get the,
And I second the resolution.
get the paperwork out of the way.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Because we do need to clean it up for future.
Definitely.
Definitely.
That's
I think That's
done.
a great thing, yeah. And thanks for being comprehensive about it and addressing kind of a little further above and beyond what we had talked about, because that definitely cleans it up for going forward. It'd be great.
Yeah, I'm for cleaning it up. Here again, we need to clean this up. But as far as, go ahead, Mayor.
Let's go.
It'd be a new
If we don't have
business.
any other discussion, we'll need to do that under other business.
Okay.
So let's go through
Sure.
real, Ms. Wright, we have some beer permits.
We do. Pull these back up. We have an arcade at 115 South Church Street. That permit actually is completely in order, and they have passed all of their inspections. So that particular permit is ready to be issued if you approve it tonight. Next door to that is a restaurant, nightclub, bar. It is still lacking some final building codes applications. And this one, as well as the one before, had already been approved by council back some time ago, but it took so long for them to get ready. Their background background approvals had expired, so we had to have them do new background checks. But that one would be issued upon completion of building codes inspections if you approve it again tonight. And then finally, we have a vape lounge at 2136 Middle Tennessee Boulevard. That one also lacks building codes inspections, but otherwise the application is in order, and we would issue that permit upon completion of those inspections if you approve it tonight. And those are our three. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions.
I'll move for approval.
Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. I have one board and commission appointment. Some would say that it's a birthday present. Would like to recommend Kurt Wade for filling Mayor Doug Young's seat on the Planning Commission.
So move.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Thank you. Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. I know you'll do a good job, Kurt. Any statements that need to be paid?
Not tonight.
Okay. Any other business come before the city council?
One item, we had a meeting prior to this one at 5:15 this afternoon discussing the multifamily housing. And I think we're well on our way to getting a ordinance written that will address our concerns with it. But because of the timing of it, I think it's advantageous to us to go ahead and extend the moratorium for 6 months or until the ordinance is approved. And so I'll make the motion that that happen.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright, will call the roll.
Ms. Gels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Any other business to come from the city council?
Mayor and council members, I also asked Mr. Tyndall to, when we send this ordinance to the legislation, to also we're going to clean the charter up as far as the pay for the council members, increase in pay for council members, and let that be a range. So in the future, you don't have to go back and forth when you make an increase, that we'll have it already in the charter.
So basically give the option to raise in the charter,
Right.
not necessarily giving a raise right now, but just giving an
Right.
option to raise.
Are you saying that would be based on the increase that the rest of the city employees get, or how do you come up with what that raise would be?
Or this will just give us the capability of doing that. It wouldn't necessarily, that's sometime now or in the future. Right, is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
Mhm.
Is it a motion?
No, what do you think about it?
I mean, I don't have any, is that what would be needed, would be the charter amendment or the legislative approval for something like that?
It would be. Right now, the charter sets the pay of council. I think it's $1,000 for the mayor and
$950.
up to $950. These are maximum numbers, so up to $950 for council people.
I'm just curious, how long has it been like that?
Since
really
1993.
1983?
No, 1993.
93?
And at the time, the last time we gave council raises, they didn't make what was in the charter. So what we did was, every time at budget year, this came up. So what we did was, whatever percentage raise council got, the employees got, council got the same percentage raise until they hit the maximum amount allowed by charter. And then that's where it's been ever since.
Which seems like that.
I'm not sure I would agree with that.
That's a good historical
But-
perspective. Do you have any idea at what time the council topped out?
No, I
About
could
what year it
look.
was?
It's been a
I
good
could
long
find
while. It's been a good long while.
It took a little while. At
In
that
2002, it was the same. I remember that. In 2002,
I
it was
would
the
just
same.
make the comment, I think you would have to be, if you have elected officials voting on a raise
Yeah,
based upon what the city employees would make, then technically you're voting on your increase.
your own
Right.
raise.
I would-
Yeah.
Well, that's why they did it, I think, was to not have this discussion
Sure.
come up every year
Right.
at budget, and it didn't take effect that year. I think it started the next year after an election or something, I don't remember, but
That's why I'd
that's
like,
why it did come up.
I wouldn't mind getting some feedback as to how other cities handle this, because it does seem kind of odd that it has not been addressed in that many years. Is there some way to address it that would provide for some other standard other than what we vote on ourselves? That
Right.
wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
So would we have to have that part of it spelled out in the charter amendment, or would it just be the number, basically? So if we said, or I don't know, whatever you would want to put on it, but let's just say you say it would be up to $1,500 a month, that you could go to at some point in the future. However you get there, do we have to lay that part out, or do we just lay out the number?
You can ask for the charter to be changed however you feel it would be appropriate. It doesn't have to have a number. It could be tied to something else, I suppose.
Consumer price index.
Right now, it sets a number, a not to exceed number.
Right now, it's a not to exceed number.
Yeah, right now it's not to exceed 1,000 for the mayor, 950
What do
per
you want
month
that to be?
for.
We really ought to look at, and I'm not just saying about the council pay, but we really in this upcoming year need to look at ways that where the charter may need adjusting to be comparable to the times that we're in. I'm not saying that the charter, obviously the charter's been here for a long time, but you know, when you start seeing things that have not been adjusted for and are not current, that seems like that's an issue. So I don't know if we need to look at where you have some date stamps or some things like that, or not to exceeds on specific amounts that are in the charter that really doesn't necessarily, 30 years from now, that may be different. So I don't know, that may be something that's just more of an overriding on what we need to look at, but
We can study that and look at what some other communities are doing. And, the challenge with the charter, we shouldn't change our charter frequently, but we want to have some ability to be flexible. And the challenge with the charter changes, you have to go to the General Assembly. So there may be something like that you may want to be able to say, from time to time, the council shall set its pay. You don't have to have a number in there, but what we can do to help you in looking at that is to see how other communities write that section, to see do they tie it to a number, or is it just written where it's up to the council.
Can I make a suggestion, or just at least bring this out as a thought, that we not include that language into the language that we've gotten so far? That way there's no weirdness as far as them maybe not wanting to approve it. You know what I mean? So we'll keep it separated.
Well, it's a different section of our charter, so you would have to address it.
I'm just saying, I just wouldn't want it to be kind of all hitting them at the same time, as if they think they have to approve all of it or none of it.
I was just looking at it, we're cleaning up, let's clean up.
Yeah. Okay. I'm good with it.
And we do comps for every employee, so, that may not be some of the information you need to share with us as other municipalities and what is comparable. So if we're in the price range, then fine, we'll leave it like it is. If it's not, then we might want to look at
I
something.
don't trust the MAG study.
Well,
This conversation does remind me of what I heard Mayor Jackson say frequently. And Mayor Jackson said, one of these days I'm going to work my way up to minimum wage. You guys put a lot of hours in, we understand.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn on this whole topic. I think that, gosh, if somebody asked what we make an hour, you'd be embarrassed to say what we make because it's so minimal. But at the same time, I don't think any of us serve in these positions. To be compensated is kind of a complimentary thing, the way I look at it.
I'm just kind of worried we only had 3 slackers run last time.
It's a legitimate concern.
so you think if we raise the salary, it would have more people? If we raise our pay, we'll get higher quality people running.
Well,
I meant to hit my
That's not
microphone button.
That's not the reason for this, I'm just saying if we're cleaning it up,
Yeah.
it's the time to do it. And this is for council members 10 and 20 years in the future.
Yeah. Should we get some feedback from you guys, put together like a draft, what you did here?
We can certainly, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if TML or MTS already has something on hand, so I'll make some calls tomorrow.
We can take another look through charter provisions to see if there's anything else that
I would recommend
merits cleaning up.
anything that, I think in this case, the charter's been around for a long time, but if there's anything that, you see that needs our attention, that is outdated, and I'm not talking about the form of our government, but if there's things that they wrote in there that
Any
are
numbers that are indexed to 1983 or 1993 might need to be looked at, no matter whether pay or whatever they are.
Okay.
Okay, beat me up, guys.
No.
I got one more. I want to go back, because I'm leaving out here kind of confused on Vice Mayor Young's seat. Okay, I know we are going to get that cleaned up and going to submit it and all. And we voted to do that, get everything cleaned up.
Yep.
But my question is, going back, what are we going to do? Are we going to vote for an election or vote for an appointment? I'm still confused on that. Do we appoint now or do we have an election? Because even, well, my opinion, I'm for appointing right now. That's where I am.
So let's make sure I understood that right, just for clarification. If we appoint prior to getting back the adoption of our changes from Tennessee, the state, it's going to be an appointment that lasts until May of 2018. Is that kind of our best guess right now?
I think that's probably the best interpretation of the statute now, is that they would have to stand for election on May 2nd.
If we wait, though, until after they adopt it, and then we appoint, that gives us a better chance of that appointment lasting until August.
They would serve out the remainder of the term.
So my take on it would be this: I still favor an election. If the majority of the council decides we do an appointment, I might think that it would be better to wait until after we get approval of this, so that that appointment does last until the full term.
Next
instead
regular
of
election.
putting us in this May to August situation. But I don't mind saying again, my first choice is an election. So I'll put it.
And, you know, it's been interesting to watch the internet this past week as far as some of the websites. One of them did a poll, and the question was basically asking the citizens which they would prefer: leave it vacant, appoint, or hold a special election. And that, of course, they were looking at the fact that there was an expense that come with the special election. And in that poll, it was split about 50-50 amongst 90% of the people. And to give you some idea, this poll, I think, had maybe a couple hundred votes. But it was split about 50-50 amongst 90% of the people that favored saving the money, I think, and their vote was split about 50-50 to either leave it vacant or appoint, which I think is a kind of a compliment to the council, that they were comfortable with whoever we would select would probably do a good job, with understanding that they're also only 1/7 of the makeup of the council. So I don't think they saw a huge pendulum swing one way or the other as far as how this council votes. I've talked to some people about it, and you know, I don't know what the role was tonight. I think we were probably unanimous on everything we voted on. And I'd say of the items that we do vote on, we generally vote unanimously on about 90% of what we vote on. Of the other 10% of the items that we do have someone who feels differently than the majority, it's usually one or two, and that's usually not because they're opposed to what it is we're doing. It's generally, from my perspective, because they think that it can continue to be improved. From my perspective, I'll go back to the red light cameras. I was never completely opposed to red light cameras. Everybody thought I was, but my opposition was the contract, and I always thought that we could get a better contract, and so it wasn't the ordinance that I was completely against, or the idea. It was just the concept that I thought it could be better. And so looking at it from that perspective, in the 5 years I've been on the council, I think we may have had 5 times that we've had a 4-5 vote. So it's so unusual that you would have a 4-5 vote, 4-3 vote, that we would. It's almost as far as the outcome of what we do and what we achieve, it's almost a non-issue as to whether we fill the seat or not. I think I do think that more representation is probably somewhat advantageous to us. I think that having more opinions is advantageous to us, but when it comes to spending $65,000 or whatever it is, I think that even the public recognizes that it's probably some potential of just wasting money unless you're just a complete constitutionalist or a libertarian who just feels that everything should have an election on it. But so I think there's several ways to look at what our options are.
Vote vacant. Yeah, we ain't figured that out yet. Can you tell us what you were trying to say?
In the short, what
Are
do
you
you
looking
think?
for a vacant, or are you looking for
I'm for whatever y'all like. I mean, really, truly, I don't have a heart set on anything. I guess the conservative part of me says I don't want to spend $60-something thousand for something that we could do and basically wind up with even potentially the same exact person as we would wind up with in the election. So, you know, if we entertain the idea of the people that we're going to run and we select one of those people who are going to run, or if we select from people who have run, I think there's the opportunity there for us to save $65,000 and still wind up with somebody who would represent the community well. And I mean, truthfully, of all the people that have ran in the last 2 or 3 elections, I think every one of them that I've talked to, I think they would have all just about made a very good council member. So I think I think we've got good options, and I think the resolution that we passed tonight gives us more options. But I don't really. I'm open to your ideas.
Well, like I stated before, I just think we appoint. And I think that's the easiest way. You know, we got elected to make hard decisions. This is a hard decision. Did we spend $61,000 on an election that we don't know what the turnout may be? It could be 7%. It could be less than 7%. And I just think that's a waste of taxpayers' money. And I think we get this amended, and then we go back to a point.
Mr. LaLance?
Yeah, I'm on any election, but the only thing I'll say about the money piece of this, that you know, we wouldn't leave it vacant to save the money that we pay a council member, the $950 a month. We wouldn't be sitting here going, well, let's leave it vacant so we don't have to pay the $950 a month, right? I mean, that would just sound asinine. And so the idea that we would choose what is the better way or whatever, to me, that's where I keep coming back. The money part, and I understand a lot of citizens look at this and they go, oh, 61,000. We moved the election to August to do, you know, we've saved a couple of those 61,000s already. This happens once every 15 or 20 years, hopefully, historically, and hopefully less. So I understand the idea of trying to save the 61,000. I get it.
But what I'm saying, Rick, is simply, would we be better off to spend the $65,000 on computers for kids in schools so we got something that's going to be there for years, or do we spend $65,000 that might fix it, give us 1/7 of an increase in numbers of council members for a short period of time, and it's probably not going to change a single outcome of anything we vote on.
And you might not have 1,000.
How about this? How about we sleep on it and be ready to vote next week? Tonight, vote what we're going to do and be ready to.
I think it would be, and this is my opinion, but, you know, really, my decision is going to be much more predicated on what comes back from the legislature, because I am not going to support appointing someone that's going to have to only serve until May and then require us to have 2 elections. That makes no sense to me. Because if we appoint someone, say the majority of the council voted to appoint someone now, without the legislature looking at this, then we're going to set ourselves up for that May election.
Even if we do appoint, we don't do it before the next election cycle or what the legislature comes back with.
If we appoint someone right now without the legislature approving that, then that person's only going to serve until the next election, which is May of 2018. And then that's where we're going to run into having that person serve for less than 90 days and then have another election. But if they approve that, then the option for the council to appoint means that person would serve the entire term.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. I think
we don't act until we get this
We
amendment.
probably need to determine what's going to happen with that.
So I move then that we wait until the approval comes, and once the approval comes, make the decision immediately. And we're talking about 30 days maybe out.
Yeah, we're hopeful. We should find out tomorrow. If it's okay, Mr. Hines, I don't mind calling one of the senators and one of the House members about, how quickly they can run the bill for us.
Thank you.
And once it's done, immediately let's act.
Just procedurally, it'll be done by the legislature, will come back here, it's got to be passed by the council by 2/3 vote, so then that'll need to occur, and then
Right.
happen after that. But
Okay.
there's one more step.
Yeah, I think that, you know exactly what you're saying, but I do think.
No, I changed it to make that a motion.
Okay. Do we
Don't
need-
have to have a motion?
Do we need a motion for that, Mr. Tindall?
To wait? No.
Okay. I withdraw my motion.
All right. Any other business to come before the council? We can give a motion that Kurt can stay under the half-century mark one more year if he wants to do that. There's a couple things going on this weekend. The Martin Luther King breakfast is on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. We also found out today that a soldier's child, they're going to be giving out or buying presents for 179 kids at Walmart on Monday or Saturday at 9 o'clock, and the mayor of Nashville is coming down to take part in that. So that's Saturday at 9. So
Tremendous turnout last Saturday for the polar bear plunge, and I compliment anybody who had the courage to jump.
Any council members, did you jump in?
I jumped, but I was out of the water quicker than I went in the water. There's video out there that proves that. So, the Old Fort Parkway, Walmart. That's a good question. On that. All right. No other business coming before council. We'll stand adjourned.